Wake my soul. Wake my soul. I certainly, as you'll hear a little bit this morning, I certainly had a time away where my soul was awoken in ways that I never felt that it could be awoken. I thought I was pretty switched on and open to most things. Being a paramedic, having worked for 20 years in some of the toughest environments, both here and overseas, I thought I'd seen everything, but my soul was awoken in ways that were certainly both confronting and inspiring at the same time. We're continuing our series today on immeasurable love with a message that I have called, "What God starts, He finishes." What God starts, He finishes. And as you've just heard, I've returned from a trip from the Philippines where I had the privilege to serve and minister right across the country. I headed 3.5 hours north in a jeepney type vehicle. You don't need a massage after you've done that, I can tell you that. And then flew into down south into a place called San Jose, and we were in the middle. I didn't tell my wife about this. I just pretended we had kind of sketchy phone calls, but we flew in at the tail end of a typhoon that was coming down there. So it was a little bit wet, and must admit, as we landed in the little prop plane, it was kind of like, Jesus, I'm hanging on here. Before I get into this morning, though, I hear that the services over the last few weeks have been incredible. Absolutely incredible. And this is no surprise because we have an exceptional leader in my wife in this place. So, but along with that, we are ably supported by an outstanding team. C3 team is an outstanding team because they carry the culture of wanting to serve our community and serve our church. And when you have a team that does that, it makes leadership really easy. It's actually, you just have to pastor one day a week because that's all we do. Because team that carries the cultures of wanting to serve others helps us just continue to go, yeah, we can strive, and it gives you that little bit more energy. One of the privileges of pastoring a church is that you get a front row insight into the lives of people on their faith journeys and on their life journeys. And today, with their permission, I'm going to share the story of two young, inspiring individuals, Cherish and Mark. The 3 hours I spent with these two mighty men and women of God truly awoke my soul to levels that I have never felt before. Before I share their story, let's turn to the Bible. I'm going to be flicking around in the Bible, so it should come up on the screen. But I'm going to be turning to the book of Genesis. I'm actually going to start at Genesis chapter 1, verse 1, and I'm going to finish in Revelation, so it could be a long morning. Now, I'm going to start in Genesis chapter 1, and I'm also going to be looking at the story of Gideon, which is found in the Old Testament book of Judges. I'm skipping through Genesis, so it doesn't kind of make sense. If you're a purveyor of the Word of God, I'm going to skipping a few verses, or we'll be here for a while. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Verse 20, then God said, let the waters swarm with fish and other life. Let the skies be filled with birds of every kind. So God created great sea creatures and every living thing that scurries and swarms in the water and every sort of bird, each producing offspring of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. Verse 25, God made all sorts of wild animals, livestock and small animals, each able to produce offerings of the same kind. And God saw that it was good. Verse 26, then God said, let us make human beings in our image to be like us. They will reign over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, the livestock and all the wild animals on the earth, and the small animals that scurry along the ground. So God created human beings in His image. In the image of God He created them. Male and female He created them. Then God blessed them. And he said, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and govern it, reign over the fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, and all the animals that scurry along the ground. Verse 29, then God said, look, I have given you every seed-bearing plant throughout the earth and all the fruit trees for your food. And I've given you every green plant as food for the wild animals, the birds in the sky, and the small animals that scurry around. Verse 31, then God looked over all he had made, and he saw that it was very good. Flicking across to Judges chapter 1, verse 6. The Israelites did evil in the Lord's sight. So the Lord handed them over to the Midianites for 7 years. The Midianites were so cruel that the Israelites made hiding places for themselves in the mountains and the caves and the strongholds. Whenever the Israelites planted their crops, marauders, I love that word, marauders from Midian, Amalek, and the people of the east would attack Israel, camping in the land and destroying crops as far away as Gaza. They left the Israelites with nothing to eat, taking all their sheep, goats, cattle, and donkeys. These enemy hoarders, coming with their livestock and tents, were as thick as locusts. They arrived on camels too numerous to count, and they stayed until the land was stripped bare. Verse 6, so Israel was reduced to starvation by the Midianites. Then the Israelites cried out to the Lord for help. Some of the most challenging pastoral sessions that I have revolve around when people genuinely ask me the question, why do bad things happen to good people? When someone comes into my office and asks me that question, I kind of get the lump in my throat, because I go to Genesis and I read where it says God created man and woman in his image, and he said it was very good. And then in the book of Judges, not too far down the track, we read of the Israelite people, God's chosen people, are starving. All the crops are gone. They're starving. And if you read these two passages without interpretation and knowledge of what happens in between, you could start questioning the whole series we've done on God's immeasurable love. How can God have an immeasurable love for us if he created us, yet not further down the track, we have a whole group of people, God's chosen people, are starving? There was times when I was in the Philippines on the first few days where I entered into a barangay, which is their slum area. And I would see not tens, not hundreds, but thousands of young kids living in impoverished conditions. And I went home the first night, and I asked for some statistics from Compassion on what sort of impact is this in the country. And I was told that there was potentially, they don't know the true numbers, but potentially 11.5 million kids living on less than $1.30 a day. 11.5 million, half of Australia's population, are kids living on less than $1.30 a day. And I remember that night reading John 1, 1-4. And it says this, in the beginning, the Word already existed, and the Word was God. He, the Word, Jesus, existed in the beginning with God. God created everything through him, and nothing was created except through him. The Word gave life to everything that was created, and his life brought light to everyone. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never extinguish it. Let me read that last verse. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness will never extinguish it. And as I went home on that first night, I got on my knees beside my bed, and I just thank God that there is a light out there that we can follow, will never be distinguished in the dark that we will follow in the world. The world is a dark place. The world is a despairing place. The world is broken and busted because we are broken and busted. But we have a promise from God John 1:4 chronologically was the first thing written. So 5 verses in it says, the light shines in the darkness, and the darkness can never and will never be extinguished. The writer of Hebrews reminds us that Jesus is the author, Jesus is the creator, Jesus is the finisher of our faith, the Alpha and the Omega. And what the writer of the Hebrews says is that God is invested. What God started at the Alpha, God will finish at the Omega. And that includes us. What God started when He created us in His image, He has a destiny and a plan for us at the end, and it is good. With that in mind, I want to share the story of Mark and Cherish. As I said, 2 of the finest people that I've ever encountered. Mark Gacciatoria. Have we got a photo of Mark? Or have I got Angelina first? It'll be Rojan. It'll come up as Rojan on there. Mark Gacciatori and Cherish Haburia were both born in 1998 in a northern province of the Philippines called Luzon. Now go to the baby ones if you can. Zach, they should be right at the start. They're about 4-year-olds. They were born in a northern province of the Philippines. That's Angelina. Called Luzon. And that's my mate Rojan. They're born in this province called Luzon, where it's a rural area to the north of Manila. There's 52 million people live in this area. They were born into impoverished conditions. They live in a slum and they survive on less than $1.30 a day. For the Compassion program, they look at children who are in poverty or in abject poverty. Poverty is deemed by the UN, will produce a number, and it's deemed at $1.30 US a day is what they live on. I don't know how they come up with that number, but that's a number they come up with. Abject poverty means they don't even have a distinguishing number for that. Isn't it interesting that even in the poverty worlds we have levels? These are not photos. The photos I showed was of Angelina and Rojan, because I obviously don't have photos of Mark and Cherish from 20 years ago. But in the passage I read in the book of Judges, the Israelites were living in conditions where their lands were stripped bare, where they were reduced to starvation. From the day these 2 young children were born, they were born and transported. Mark actually has the story that he was born in the slum, in a 2-room house where he has 7 siblings. Not 2 bedrooms, 2-room house where he has 7 siblings. And he was born there on the floor. For the Israelites, they were living in conditions because they had utter obedience to God. We read that. And as a result, they'd been overtaken by an enemy who was stealing their food, raiding their crops, and destroying their land. For Mark and for Cherish and for Rojan and Angelina, the 2 photos I just showed, the reason they are poor is actually immaterial. They don't know why. They were born into it. The point is, they found themselves in a desperate situation that we can never comprehend. We cannot comprehend, as you walked into these areas, the conditions that they were born into. For Gideon, the son of Joash, from the tribe of Manasseh, he was in a desperate situation. His whole land was being raided. He was starving. And when Gideon is found by one of God's angels, he is at the bottom of a wine press threshing wheat. There's no air circulation, so it's just hanging around him. He's in desperate situations. And when the angel comes to him, he talks to him and he says, you're going to be used for great things. And Gideon says, well, I was born into poverty. I'm doing the best I can. I'm the smallest in my family, and my family is the smallest tribe in the area. So why use me? For Mark and for Cherish, being born at 4 years old in these slum areas, they must have felt like saying, why use me? I'm good for nothing. Can I tell you, church, what God starts, He finishes. What God starts, He finishes. Gideon was found in the bottom of a wine press, threshing wheat. when an angel finds him. When things are tough in our life, we have a tendency to hide away. It's our natural instinct. And Mark shared a story with me. He said that he was about 6 years old, and it was just before compassion found him. And he remembers at the age of about 6 years finding a piece of roofing tin iron for the roof. One sheet. It was full of holes, and it was the back of the slum area to where he lives. He checked underneath it, and there was no one there. So for 2 days, he hid under this piece of roofing. One piece of tin. And he shares a story as a 6-year-old hiding under this piece of tin because in his life, he didn't know why he was born into impoverished conditions. He just knew that he was weak, he was starving, so he was trying to hide away from everything. What God starts, he finishes. You can't hide away from God. And God's angel found Gideon. And Gideon, who said he's the weakest in his area, the angel said to him, guess what? You might call yourself the weakest. I call you mighty hero, strong warrior. Because that's what God does to us. When we have self-doubt and say, we're the weakest of our family, we're the weakest of our clan, we've got a God who says, strong warrior, mighty warrior. Gideon was recognized as the least in his family. And as it related to Gideon, many theologians will say that he was a little bit weak because he doubted God 3 times. Mark tells me about many times when pastors would come into their slum area and he would go and find his hideaway spot under a piece of iron for the roof. That was his way of getting away. No one will find me because I'm the weakest in the land. At age 6, God came knocking on the door of the slum in which Mark and Cherish lived. Not in the form of an angel, but in the form of a local pastor. I got to meet this pastor. He's 62 years old. He walks 8.5 kilometres to work to his church every single morning at 62. And he walked into this slum area. And both Mark and Cherish shared that at an early age they had moments of doubt, just like Gideon, where they said, thank you, Pastor, for what you're offering. Thank you for heaping praise upon me, but I'm too broken for you to do anything with. What God starts, he's going to finish. And on the first time when the local pastor came in and talked about the compassion program and how they wanted to invest in education and health and this little thing called Jesus Christ, both Mark and Cherish talked about the fact of they ran away. They ran to their wine press. Can I tell you that when God sees our potential and our future, when we can't even see our next meal? When we are facing hurdles in front of us that might seem overwhelming, when we are facing sickness in front of us that might seem overwhelming, when all we want to do is crawl under a piece of sheeting iron for a roof and get away, God says, what I started, I am going to finish. And we might think we hide away from these things. Gideon tried to hide away. Gideon used 3 occasions where he said, God, I'm not good enough for this. You don't need me. I'm the weak one. And God said, you're exactly the one I want to use. You are exactly the one I'm coming for. And can I tell you, church, God is saying this morning, you are exactly the one I'm coming for. With all the hurdles in front of you, with all the brokenness in front of you, with all the doubts you have in front of you, God is saying, what I started in you, I am going to finish. Because you matter to me. Because I created you in my image. And what God creates in his image, He says, what I start, I'm going to finish, because I believe in a God that didn't create junk. And Mark and Cherish were not junk. They were born into starvation. They were born into a situation that was tough. They were born into things that we cannot comprehend. But God said, you're not broken and busted. You're perfectly the way I want you to be. And I'm going to use you. And you're going to share. And you're going to see others come to know me, because your light is going to shine in darkness. Because that's the word of God. Can I have the photo of Cherish as a 20-year-old? This is the same girl at age 20. Cherish told me a story that as an 8-year-old child, she would go to school with compassion. Then after school, she would stand on the street corner of a dirt road and sell fish balls for 3 pesos each. Not even a cent. She would do 8 hours every single night. And she'd go home with her family with $3. But I watched this woman, and I sat across in a restaurant with her, and I sobbed like a baby. As I saw what God started, He is finishing in this woman. She spoke beautifully. She's articulate not just in Tagalog and Ilocano, but 3 other languages, and probably spoke English better than I do. She did her schooling. She got enrolled in school. She completed her high schooling and came cum laude of not just her school, but the whole district. A girl that was born in a slum was the top student in an area that has over 2.5 million kids doing schooling. Cherish has a beautiful voice, and I sobbed as I thought of my girls singing. At 11 years old, she gave her life to Christ. She now, every Friday and Saturday, goes to the local church and teaches others to worship God. A girl that was born in the slums and could have said, go away from me, God, I'm the weakest in my family. When God said, what I'm starting, I'm going to finish, He is doing in Cherish. After dinner, I brought her an ice cream, 2 scoops. At age 20, she'd never eaten an ice cream. She sat there and it was dripping, and I'm going, Cherish, you got to eat this thing. She did not know what to do with the cone. She had no idea. And she's trying to put her tongue in because she didn't know she could eat the cone. What God started in her, He is finishing. God is using this woman to shine the light in darkness in her slum. Cherish met me in Manila with a group of people. And she told me afterwards, or as we were finishing the ice cream, she shared with us, because we said, how are you getting home? You live in Manila now, and because she's looking to do schooling. She said, no, I'm heading back home to my home. And I looked at this girl. She had a beautiful top on. And the compassion person that came with us said she went and spent $4 on that top. She looked beautiful. It was the first piece of clothing she'd ever bought. And as she boarded that bus to go home, it was a 3-hour trip. She had a smile as wide as you could get. And I said, Cherish, where do you live now? She goes, I'm going home, to my home. And she said, I'm going to lay my head on a mattress on the ground because she's never slept in bed, with 5 siblings on one mattress. And she said, I'm going to tell them about the hope of Jesus Christ. What God starts, He finishes. God is using Cherish, a girl born in the dust on the ground, to shine light in not only her family, but in worship across that place. Do you know how many kids go and worship on a Friday and Saturday night in their worship team? 180 kids are in their singing team. This girl does it by herself with one keyboard. 180 kids turned up on the Friday night to do worship practice with her. There was a choirs of heaven. It was a sound of heaven, I can tell you. At the same meeting, I got to meet Mark. This is my boy Mark. Goofy looking dude. I saw images as I sat across the table from Mark of a mighty warrior like Gideon. The minute I met Mark, I thought of Gideon hiding in the wine press. And as he told me the story as a 6-year-old hiding under a sheet of roofing iron, I could just see this guy and I thought, man, Gideon is all over him. So I started calling him Gideon, strong warrior. Mark's story is this. He was born in the same slum. Mark helps lead a youth group now at age 20. In the youth group, they had a lazy 450 kids turn up. Mark has no formal qualifications. Mark has no idea what sprout ball was or dodgeball was. Mark had a heart to say what God starts in him, he's going to finish. 450 kids come. They don't have a hall and a luxury like we have. They played outside and it's typhoon season. And Mark, with a peaceful voice, had complete control over every single one of them. What God starts, he's going to finish. Mark shared me the story where he needed to get food for his family. So at age 12, he went to the local Jollibee store, which is like our McDonald's. And as he went to the local Jollibee store, he said to them, please, sir, he had to walk over 11 kilometres to get to his local store. 11 kilometres. I get annoyed when I have to drive that far. And he walked in and he said to them, can I sweep your floors and take out your garbage for any sort of money? At age 12. And the boss said yes. And he would do a 6-hour shift and he'd get given $1 Australian. And he would cherish that Australian dollar and he would walk home again. For 7 years, he did that 4 nights a week. Never missed one shift. At age 19, the manager of Jollibee said, I'm moving on to something or other else. Mark, I'd like you to be the manager of Jollibee's. I want you to manage. And Mark said, I'm the weakest in my clan. I live in the slum 11 kilometres away. And he said, I want you to manage Jollibee's. And this manager, who I'd love to meet one day, said to him, as a manager, you can do one thing straight away. One initiative that you can do straight away, and if it's okay and if it's fiscally responsible, we'll put it in place by the weekend. And he said, go away and think about it. And Mark said, excuse me, sir, I've already thought about this. This was a young man who was born on the floor of a slum, who at age 6 was hiding away from not only God, but from the world, hoping that everything went away, hiding under a sheet of iron, has just been offered to manage a Jollibee store. And the manager said to him, you can do one thing. And he said, I would like to put a Bible, a notepad, and a pen in the staff room. The manager looked at him and said, is that all you want to do? And he said, that's what I want to do. So he said, we'll make it happen. So they got a Bible, a notepad, and a pen. This was 18 months ago. At age 19, he's 20 and a half now. There is 42 people in total work at that Jollibee store. 23 have come to know Jesus Christ. What God starts, He's going to finish. God does not see a boy hiding under roofing iron. He sees a mighty warrior. He sees Gideon hiding under there and he says, do you know what? You are going to be the light that is going to shine in the darkness of this world. I said to Mark, dream a little bit bigger, buddy. As I prayed over him, I said, dream a little bit bigger. And he said this to me. This is a quote. He said, if God took the effort to create me in His own image, then despite what I am facing, I am going to make the effort to honour Him in everything I do. Thanks, team. 2 months ago, Mark approached his same manager, who's now the district manager of the area. There is 950 Jollibee stores across the Philippines. They like their fried chicken. There is 950 Jollibee stores. The district officer came to Mark and said to him, Mark, you're doing so well. What's your next dream? And he said, my next dream is that in 950 Jollibee stores across the nation, we will have a Bible, a notepad, and a pen in every single staff room. I brought his first 40 Bibles. I believe that he is going to be a light in dark areas. That what God started with him, He's going to finish. In areas of darkness, whether it be in fast food, whether it be in other slums, wherever it might be, God is using this young man and this young woman to change nations. 450 kids go every single Friday night and do youth group where he shares the word of God with them. I went along on the Friday night and they asked me, do you want to preach? I said, no, man, I'm sitting back in awe of you, brother. And this young kid, a goofy looking dude, stood up there. They don't have microphones like this. But he stood up there and he had command of that whole place. Why? Because the light of God was shining through him. I specifically asked for this song Awakening by Chris Tomlin this morning. Because through the lens of Mark and Cherish, my God awoke something in me. I felt that I've always been compassionate. I felt that I've always looked out for others. But God woke something in me, and it wasn't just, hey, I want to give them money. Not at all. What God awoke in me is, man, get off your butt and start realizing that you are the light of the world and God wants to use you. What God said to me is, stop hiding away. And you could go, yeah, sure, you're the senior pastor, you're not hiding away. There's areas of my life I'm hiding away. And God is saying to me, you are the light of the world. Deal with your situations. Get out from under the sheet of iron. Come out of the wine press. I know you're imperfect. I know you're broken. I created you. But I want you to be the light of this world. Because there's going to be 950 Jollibee stores are going to have a Bible, a notepad, and a pen. And 23 kids came to know Christ there. They're going to see a revival in that nation. Mark Twain wrote a book called The Prince and the Pauper. And it tells the tale of two young boys who were approximately the same age, and they were almost identical in appearance. And one boy was a son of the king, and while the other was the son of a pauper. And the two boys decided to exchange lives for a while, and they decided to do different things. In similar fashion, Jesus Christ, the Son of God, came to earth and lived as a pauper with us on the ground. He experienced hunger. He experienced tiredness. He wept. This was the Son of God. But he changed and he came down and he temporarily exchanged his heavenly position in order to live in the world that had become dark. Why? Because Jesus has an immeasurable love for us. His love we cannot even comprehend. Jesus did this because he came to deliver truth in a world of false beliefs. He did this because he came to give us a full of grace message in a place where there was no grace. He did this because he came to give us redemption in places where we can't even forgive ourselves. Jesus describes the depth of his love for us in this. As the Father has loved me, so have I loved you. Now remain in love, just as I have obeyed my Father's commands, and remain in his love. I have told you this so that my joy may be in you and that your joy may be complete. Can we just all stand up? Can we just stand up right where we are? I want to share this morning that nothing compares to God's love for us. Nothing compares to God's immeasurable love for us. Nothing compares to God taking a young boy living under a sheet of iron, a young girl who's still at age 20 is going home to sleep on one mattress with 5 siblings. But on a Friday night, she is singing and she's worshiping God, and people are becoming saved because they are lights in a dark world. Gideon eventually said yes to God. Mark eventually said yes to God. Cherish eventually said yes to God. I want to ask you today, if God is knocking on your door, are you ready to say yes to God? Are you ready to say yes to God? Are you ready to say yes to God? It took Gideon 3 times. It took Cherish to have self-doubt. It took Mark to run away. I'm asking you today, if God is speaking in your life, are you ready to say yes to God? Because he's got immeasurable love for you. And what he started in you, he's ready to finish in you. We're going to sing this song, Awake My Soul, Awake My Soul. If God is saying yes and you're ready to say yes to him, I want you just where you are, just come out the front and say, yes, God, yes, God, yes, God. I'm ready to stand up for you. I'm ready to do things for you. I'm ready to be your light in a dark world. I'm ready to do it. I might be weak. I might be broken. I might be imperfect, but I'm ready to say yes to you, God.